The manifest listed 3,000 units of SPF 50 mineral block arriving at Dock 4, but the vibration under my boots told me the crane was lifting something heavier. I didn't need to see the paperwork to know the load distribution was off. It's a frequency thing. Heavy cargo hums, light cargo rattles. This container was groaning. I checked my watch. 8 o'clock on the dot. Efficiency is the only currency that matters in a supply chain, and right now someone was spending money they didn't have. I adjusted my hard hat and walked toward the edge of the shipping lane, ignoring the chaotic shouting of the stevedores. I wasn't here for the workers. I was here for the audit. Solstice Skin. Was the client a luxury brand hemorrhaging money due to a supply chain fracture that nobody could find? My job was to find it, document it, and bill them for the solution. It was supposed to be a standard forensic audit. Boring, predictable, safe. Then I saw her. She wasn't wearing PPE. She was standing near the loading bay doors, a silk blouse, fighting a losing battle against the ocean breeze, holding a phone to her ear like it was a weapon. She looked out of place against the rusted steel and gray concrete, too polished, too frantic. I don't care what the spreadsheet says, Julian. Her voice cut through the diesel roar of a passing forklift. The formula creates a precipitate if it sits above 80 degrees for more than 2 days. If those containers have been on the tarmac since Friday, they are ruined. I stopped walking. I pulled my own clipboard tight against my chest. She was talking about thermal degradation in chemical logistics. Most executives didn't know a precipitate from a pallet jack. She spun around pacing and her sunglasses slid down her nose. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired a coffee fixes, but the kind of tired that settles in the bones when you've been fighting a losing war for months. She rubbed her temple with 2 fingers, a sharp digging motion, trying to physically press the stress out of her head. I watched her hand. No ring. Expensive watch set 5 minutes fast. A control freak. Takes one to know one. She froze. She must have felt me looking, or maybe my silence was just louder than the machinery. She pushed her sunglasses back up and glared at me. "Can I help you?" she snapped, lowering the phone. "Or are you just another person waiting to tell me I'm imagining the problem?" "You're not imagining it," I said. My voice came out flatter than I intended. It usually does. "But you're wrong about the timeline. Thermal degradation for zinc oxide takes 4 days at that temperature, not 2. Your product is safe if we move it to climate control within the next hour." She blinked. The aggression didn't leave her posture, but her grip on the phone loosened. "Who are you?" "Parker Scott. Independent audit. Your board hired me to find out why your profit margins are bleeding out." Her expression shifted from annoyance to defensive steel. "Great. Another man with a calculator here to tell me my passion doesn't fit in a column." "Passion creates variables," I said, stepping past her to check the container seal. "Variables cause bankruptcy. I'm here to eliminate them." I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back to her and scanned the barcode. But the back of my neck prickled. I knew with an irritating certainty that this audit wasn't going to be boring. It was going to be a disaster. The boardroom smelled like stale espresso and fear. It was 3 days later, and the recall notice sat in the center of the mahogany table like a grenade with the pin pulled. "It's a disaster, Annika," Julian said. He was the CFO, smooth, well-tailored, the kind of guy who used buzzwords to hide incompetence. Reports of skin irritation from the latest batch. "The influencers are tearing us apart." Annika sat at the head of the table. She looked smaller here than she had on the docks, hemmed in by men in gray suits. Her hands were clasped so tightly on the table her knuckles were white. It's not the formula, she said, her voice steady but strained. I tested that batch myself. It left the lab perfect. Lab conditions aren't the real world, Julian countered, checking his phone. Maybe if you spent less time micromanaging the creative direction and more time on operations. Operations is why I'm here, I interrupted. The room went quiet. I stood in the corner leaning against a whiteboard. I hate sitting in meetings. Sitting implies comfort. Mr. Scott? Julian smiled, a shark, showing teeth. Our expensive auditor. Have you found the leak? I've found several, I said, flipping a page in my ledger. But right now, we have an immediate containment issue. The recall logistics are a mess. You're shipping return labels to customers in zones that haven't even received the bad batch yet. You're panicking. We are protecting the brand, Julian snapped. You are wasting $40,000 in shipping costs, I corrected. I need access to the warehouse management system, full admin rights. I can map the distribution flow and isolate the affected lot numbers. We recall 5,000 units, not 50,000. Annika looked up. For the first time, the defensive wall cracked. You can do that. It's math, Miss Mitchell, not magic. Do it, she said, standing up. Parker, you have the floor. Julian, give him the keys. Julian's smile faltered. Annika, he's a contractor. We can't just give him the keys, Julian, or I'll audit your department next. I looked at Annika. She met my gaze, chin lifted. There was a fire there, buried under layers of corporate exhaustion. I need a workspace, I said to her. Somewhere quiet. I don't work in open offices. Take the conference room next to mine, she said. And Parker. Yes. Don't make me regret this. I didn't answer. I just nodded. I don't make promises. I deliver deliverables. The inciting incident wasn't an explosion. In supply chain logistics, disasters are rarely loud until it's too late. It was a whisper. I was in the warehouse a week later, late at night. The air conditioning hummed a low thrum that usually helped me think. I had mapped the supply routes, cross-referencing shipping manifests with weather patterns. I was looking for heat spikes. Annika was there too. She shouldn't have been. VPs don't usually walk the floor at 10 p.m., but she was pacing the aisle of row 4, checking inventory tags personally. I watched her from the mezzanine. She moved with a frenetic energy, pulling boxes, checking seals, putting them back. She was looking for a needle in a haystack, but she didn't know what the needle looked like. I walked down the metal stairs, the grating clanging under my boots. She jumped when I reached the bottom. You're going to give yourself a migraine, I said. She exhaled, leaning back against a pallet of cardboard boxes. She looked stripped down, blazer off sleeves, rolled up hair, and a messy knot. I already have one. Row 4 is clear, I said. I checked it 2 hours ago. I have to be sure, Parker. This company, it's not just a job. I built this formula in my kitchen 10 years ago. If this recall destroys our reputation, I lose everything. My house, my name. Everything. She wasn't looking for pity. She was stating the stakes. I respect stakes. Go home, Annika. I can't. Then eat, I said. I pointed to the break room table where I'd left a grease-stained bag. I ordered Thai food. Pad See Ew. No spice, extra broccoli. I noticed you picked the peppers out of your salad at lunch yesterday. She stared at me, genuinely stunned. You notice that? I notice patterns. It's my job. She walked over to the table slowly, as if it were a trap. She opened the container, the steam rising up. You're a strange man, Parker Scott. I'm efficient. She took a bite, closing her eyes for a second. A small noise of relief escaped her throat. It was the most honest sound I'd heard in this building all week. "Thank you," she whispered. I turned away to hide the fact that my chest felt tight. "Eat. I have to check the loading dock logs." I walked toward the loading bay, needing the cold air. As I passed a stack of crates near the rear exit, I heard a voice. Low. Urgent. "Yeah, the swap is done. Batch 404 is labeled as 405. They won't know until the customers start screaming." I froze. It was Leo, the night foreman. He was on his cell phone, huddled in the shadows between two containers. "Don't worry," Leo hissed. "Julian promised me the overtime would cover it. Just get the truck here." I stepped back into the shadow of a pillar. Sabotage. It wasn't a mistake. It was a systematic replacement of good product with bad product to crash the stock price before the merger. Julian. I could have confronted Leo right there. But I didn't have the paper trail yet. Accusations without proof are just gossip. I needed the manifest. I stayed in the shadow long enough to capture three things: Leo's voice, the dock door number behind him, and the tail end of a license plate when the truck rolled past the security gate. I didn't confront him. Not yet. In this building, an accusation without a chain of custody gets you sued and then buried. I walked to the security office like I belonged there. The guard on duty was half asleep behind a bank of monitors. I slid my badge across the desk and kept my voice neutral. "I'm the auditor. I need a time-stamped export from gate cam 2 for the last 2 hours, plus the access log for the rear exit. Video file name creation time and the system hash." He blinked, waking up. "We don't usually." "You'll do it," I said. Not loud, certain. "If this turns into a recall fraud case, your footage becomes evidence. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to preserve data." He hesitated, then moved. I handed him an encrypted secure drive and watched him plug it into the export station. The system chewed for a minute, then spat out an export report camera ID file name creation time and a completion timestamp. He printed the report, signed it, and slid it to me. Back at my laptop, I verified the file and generated the hash myself. I wrote the hash string into my ledger and stapled the signed export report behind it. Evidence needs a paper shadow. Why not call the police right then? Because Julian had friends, and a warning shot would give him time to burn everything digital. We needed a clean, internal preservation order, first board level, so when law enforcement arrived, there would still be something left to find. I turned back to the break room. Annika was scraping the bottom of the takeout container. She looked up, smiling for the first time. "It was good," she said. "You're not as robotic as you pretend to be." "We have a problem," I said, cutting through the moment. "A big one." Her smile vanished. "What?" "I need you to trust me," I said, stepping into her space. I didn't touch her, but I stood close enough to block out the rest of the warehouse. "I need you to stop checking boxes and start stalling the board. I can prove Julian is sabotaging the line, but I need 48 hours. "Julian." She paled. He's been with me for 5 years. Data doesn't lie, Annika. People do. Give me 48 hours. Don't tell him I know. Can you do that? She looked at me, searching for a crack in my face. She wouldn't find one. I don't bluff. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay. What do we do?" "We work," I said. The next 2 days were a blur of caffeine and spreadsheets. We turned her office into a war room. I moved my station in there, laptop, ledger, thermal printer. We fell into a rhythm, a domesticity of crisis. At 10 a.m., she was spiraling about a press release. "They're going to slaughter us in the comments," she said, pacing the rug, wearing a hole in the expensive wool. I didn't look up from my screen. "Let them talk. Facts beat rhetoric." Move the desk lamp to the left, you're casting a shadow on your notes. She moved the lamp. You're bossy. I'm correct. At 2 p.m., I was cross-referencing the gate logs with Leo's shift card. I hit a wall. The digital logs had been wiped. I exhaled, snapping the laptop shut. Annika was at my side instantly. She didn't ask what was wrong. She placed a fresh cup of coffee on the coaster, black, 2 ice cubes, exactly how I drink it, to drink it fast, and rested her hip against the edge of my desk. You're grinding your teeth, she said softly. I lost the timestamps. You'll find them, she said. You're Parker Scott. You found a missing container in a hurricane in 2018. I Googled you. I looked up at her. She was smiling just a little. You researched me. Due diligence, she teased. Then her face softened. Take a break. 5 minutes, please. She reached out, and for a second I thought she was going to touch my shoulder. Her hand hovered in the air. The space between us crackled, not with electricity, but with gravity. A heavy pulling weight. My breathing stalled. My shoulders went rigid. I watched her fingers hover an inch from my sleeve, and the warehouse noise thinned to a dull blur. I didn't step in. I didn't step away. I just held the line, eyes locked on that hand, waiting for the contact I couldn't afford. The silence between us dropped like ballast. I stood up abruptly, moving away from her hand. I saw the hurt flash in her eyes, but I couldn't risk it. If I lost my focus, she lost her company. I need to go to the server room, I said, my voice rough. If they're wiping logs, I need an export from the backup volume before it gets overwritten. I walked out. I didn't look back. If I had, I might have stayed, and we didn't have time for staying. The server room wasn't a room. It was a cage. Cold air blasted from the vents, and the fluorescent lights made everything look sickly. I signed the access sheet with my full name and the exact time, because details matter when someone tries to rewrite history. Then I found the backup cabinet and the label printer on the wall. A neat row of backup cartridges sat behind a keyed latch. Someone had already tried to be clever. 2 slots were empty, and the sign-out log had a blank line where a name should have been. I photographed it. Close-up. Wide shot. My ledger in frame. Proof that the log was tampered with. The IT tech on duty, a kid named Mason with a nervous habit of tapping his badge, hovered behind me. CFO said you weren't allowed in here after hours. Then the CFO can explain to the board why our evidence went missing, I said. I kept my tone calm. Calm is a weapon. I checked the remaining cartridges and verified the labels. Weekly archive, nightly differential. I didn't need the missing ones if I could reconstruct the timeline from parallel systems. People forget that warehouses have more cameras than offices. I asked Mason to export the WMS audit trail for lot number edits, who changed batch 404 to 405, and went along with the badge access logs for the loading zone doors and the forklift telemetry engine on times and aisle locations. Machines don't lie, they don't have ego. He started to argue, then stopped when I handed him a single sheet, my engagement letter signed by the chairman granting full admin access for forensic operational review. I watched him read the line twice. Okay, he said, swallowing. What format? Write once media? 2 copies, I said. 1 for me, 1 for the board's counsel, and print the export summary with checksums. The secure drive's right light blinked. The printer spat out pages. I signed and dated each one, then sealed them in a manila envelope and wrote across the flap in black marker, "Do not open chain of custody." When I walked back toward Annika's office, my focus was razor thin. I wasn't thinking about her hand anymore. I was thinking about time. Julian had moved from sabotage to deletion. That meant he was close. Beat 6 hit us on Thursday morning, the midpoint twist. I had the restored log exports. I had the proof. I was walking toward Annika's office to show her the timeline of the swap. The alarm blared, a sharp, rhythmic shriek that meant chemical hazard. "Evacuation," a voice boomed over the intercom. "Sector 4, spill reported." Sector 4 was where we had quarantined the good stock. I ran. I didn't follow evacuation protocol. I ran toward the danger because that's where the evidence was. I found Annika near the bay doors. She was coughing, holding her sleeve over her mouth. A drum of solvent had been tipped over deliberately, and the fumes were filling the loading zone. "Annika." I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "The product," she coughed, pointing. "The water sprinklers. If they go off, the water damage ruins everything." "Let it go," I yelled over the alarm. "No, that's $3 million, Parker. It's the last of our capital." She tried to pull away from me, to run toward the manual shutoff valve on the far wall. I wrapped my arm around her waist and hauled her back. She was strong, fighting me, kicking at my shins. "It's over," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you get it? If I lose this, I'm nothing. I'm 40 years old and I have nothing else." "You have you," I shouted, spinning her around so she had to look at me. The alarms were deafening, but I needed her to hear this. "You are the asset, Annika, not the cream, not the brand. You. The inventory is replaceable. You are not." She went still in my arms. She looked up at me, eyes wide, red-rimmed, terrified. For the first time, I saw the fear she hid behind the sunglasses, the fear of being irrelevant. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," I said, my voice dropping. "I've got you. I have the exit strategy. Trust me." I walked her out into the sunlight. We stood in the parking lot as the fire trucks arrived. She was shivering despite the heat. I took off my blazer, my rigid armor-like blazer, and draped it over her shoulders. She pulled it tight. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, looking at the ground. "You're just the auditor." "I'm not just the auditor anymore," I said. It was the closest I could come to saying the truth. The fallout was immediate. The safety violation shut down the facility. The board called an emergency meeting to remove Annika as CEO, citing gross negligence and safety mismanagement. That was the leverage. Julian used the spill which he orchestrated to frame her as reckless. I was summoned to the temporary offices the next morning. Julian was there looking smug. "We need your final report, Mr. Scott," Julian said, confirming that Mrs. Mitchell's chaotic management style led to the safety breach. "Do that and your invoice will be paid with a 50% bonus." I sat in the chair, my ledger on my lap. I looked at Julian. I looked at the paperwork he slid across the desk. It was a pre-written statement blaming Annika. "She's done," Julian said, leaning in. "Don't go down with the ship, Parker. You're a logic guy. Be logical." I looked at the pen. Logic dictated I sign it. I take the money, I leave, I keep my reputation clean. Annika was a sinking ship, but I remembered her face in the parking lot. I remembered how she trusted me to order her lunch. "I need 24 hours to finalize the data," I said. Julian narrowed his eyes. "You have until the board meeting tomorrow at noon. If you don't present this report, we'll sue you for breach of contract." I walked out. I went to my car. I took out my phone and dialed the one number I knew would answer. "Annika," I said when she picked up. "Parker, they locked me out of the email. I can't access the files." Her voice was shaking. "I know. Listen to me carefully. Meet me at the 24-hour diner on 4th Street. Bring every scrap of paper you have from the lab tests, the physical notes, not the digital ones." "Why?" "Because we're going to build a paper trail so heavy it crushes them." We worked all night in the booth at the back of the diner. It was the only neutral ground we had. I watched her sort through wrinkled notebook pages. She was brilliant. Chaotic, yes, but brilliant. She knew every chemical reaction by heart. "Here," she said, pointing to a date. I signed off on the stabilization test on the 12th. Julian claims the order went in on the 10th. "There," I said, circling it with my red pen. Discrepancy. We built the timeline, minute by minute. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. Around 4 a.m., she dropped her head into her hands. "I'm so tired, Parker." "I know." She looked up at me. The diner lights were harsh, buzzing. "Why are you staring at me now?" she asked quietly. "The problem is on the paper, not on my face." I froze. I hadn't realized I was doing it. I was memorizing the line of her jaw the way her hair fell over her eye. "I'm checking for fatigue indicators." I lied. "Liar," she whispered. A small smile touched her lips. "You look at me like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve." "You're not a puzzle," I said. "Puzzles have a solution. You're an expanding system, infinite variables." "Is that a compliment?" "In my world, it's the highest one." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm. My heart hammered against my ribs like a loose piston. I didn't pull away this time. I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers through hers. "We're going to win this," I said. "I believe you," she said. And she squeezed my hand. The boardroom. Noon. The climax. The room was full. The shareholders were there. Julian sat at the right hand of the chairman, looking like the cat who got the cream. Annika walked in. She wasn't wearing the frantic silk blouse anymore. She was wearing a structured navy suit. Sharp. Dangerous. I walked in a step behind her, carrying a banker's box of documents. "Ms. Mitchell," the chairman said, "this meeting is a formality. The safety violation is grounds for immediate termination." The safety violation was a cover-up. Annika said, her voice ringing clear. She didn't sit down. She stood at the head of the table. "For sabotage." "Desperate accusations," Julian scoffed. "Mr. Scott, please present your audit." The room turned to me. Julian smirked at me, expecting his pre-written lie. I placed the box on the table. I opened it. I took out 2 documents and set them on the table like weights. First, a digital log printout restored from the server's backup volume image, WMS audit trail, lot number, edit history, and the export hash on the header. Second, a paper invoice Julian had pushed through accounting, hand-signed, stamped, and clean enough to fool anyone who didn't read the numbers. "This is the chain of custody," I said. I didn't look at Julian. I looked at the chairman. The digital trail shows batch 404 was relabeled to 405 at 2217 from a terminal assigned to the CFO's office. The invoice claims the opposite, an early shipment that never happened. They can't both be true. Julian stood up. "That's a lie. Digital logs can be faked." "That's why it isn't one log," I said, calm as a bomb squad technician. "It's 3 systems that don't share a motive. Gate cam to export, badge access at the rear exit, WMS audit trail, same timestamps, same door, same user session." I slid the invoice closer to the chairman. "Your paper says the truck arrived at 2040. The gate export shows no entry at 2040. Your badge log shows Julian's assistant accessed the loading zone at 2215. And the WMS trail shows the lot edit 2 minutes later." I set a final page on top of the box, a bank transfer record. Then I traced the vendor payments. "You cut costs by 40% and then routed the difference through a shell account." The room went silent. The chairman picked up the paper. He looked at Julian. "Security," the chairman said. Julian tried to bluster, but it was over. The math didn't lie. Annika stood there watching him get escorted out. She didn't gloat. She just took a deep breath and her shoulders dropped an inch. The chairman turned to her. Annika, we didn't know. You didn't look, she said. You looked at the profit column, not the product. She turned to me. Parker looked. We walked out of the building an hour later. The sun was setting over the harbor, turning the industrial cranes into silhouettes against a burning orange sky. It was over. The recall was managed. The sabotage was exposed. Her company was safe. Annika didn't go back to the office that evening. Neither did I. We drove past the port and kept going until the concrete turned to sand. A quiet beach sat a few miles down the coast. Public plain, no paparazzi, no investors. Just wind salt and the steady crash of waves that didn't care about quarterly reports. She changed in the restroom by the parking lot and came back wrapped in a thick blue and white towel secured tight across her chest like armor. Sunglasses on, hair down. She settled onto a white-cushioned lounge chair under a beach umbrella angled toward me. For the first time since I met her, her shoulders weren't braced for impact. I stayed in my gray t-shirt and took the chair beside her close enough to talk over the surf facing the water. I set one object between us on the sand, a single bottle of SPF 50 mineral sunscreen, the same brand she'd been fighting to protect. You brought work to the beach, she said, amused. I brought proof, I corrected. I tapped the bottle. And an apology for assuming you could endure another day without a break. She tilted her head, studying me over the rim of her sunglasses. That familiar heat returned, the one that wasn't about lust. It was about gravity. About two people recognizing a pattern they couldn't unsee. Why are you staring at me now? She asked, softer than in the diner, like she was testing whether the world had changed. Because the fight is over, I said, and I can finally look at you without counting seconds. Her smile faltered. Not hurt. Something closer to relief. She reached out first, one hand landing on my forearm, steady, deliberate. Then she nodded once, a clear yes. Then say what you mean, Parker. My answer is simple, I said, and my voice stayed level. I'm not here to fix your company anymore. I'm here to build a life that doesn't break when the pressure hits. She went very still. Even the ocean seemed to pause. Then she laughed, quiet, surprised, and leaned back into the chair, letting the towel stay exactly where it was. Safe, modest, real. Okay, she said. Then start with this. She held the keys out, waiting. I didn't reach for them right away. I reached for her hand. I held it steady and met her eyes until the nervous flicker in her smile settled. Then I took the keys. Not the company keys. The keys to her home. Before we moved, I shifted my chair a few inches to cut the wind off her shoulders and checked the shoreline, once habit, not paranoia. No cameras pointed at us. No curious strangers close enough to listen. Just distance and open sky. The first protection I could offer her was privacy. We stayed until the sun dropped behind the horizon and the wind turned sharp. When she finally stood, she didn't wobble. She looked like herself again. We went back to the car. This was the part where the consultant shakes hands and leaves. The contract was fulfilled. So, Annika said, crossing her arms. She looked nervous again. You're done. The audit is complete, I said. Right. She looked at her shoes. Well, send me the invoice. I can't, I said. She looked up confused. Why? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't an invoice. It was a calendar. My calendar. I wrote something down, I said. For next week. She took the paper. I had written her name on every single day for the next month. Annika, Annika, Annika. I don't have an opening for an auditor, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want to be your auditor, I said. I want to be your partner in operations, in everything. She looked at me stunned. You hate chaos, Parker. I am a walking hurricane. I know, I said. I took a step closer. But a hurricane needs an anchor, or it just spins out into the sea. She stepped closer until I could feel her warmth eyes steady on mine. I reached out and finally tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My hand lingered on her cheek. She leaned into my touch, closing her eyes. Stay, she whispered. I've already filed the paperwork, I said softly. I'm not going anywhere. She laughed a wet, teary sound and wrapped her arms around my neck. I held her tight right there on the sidewalk in front of the glass tower she owned. The numbers balanced. The system was stable. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to check the math. I knew exactly where I belonged. Integrity is doing the right work when nobody is watching. Love is the same steady, protective, repeatable. Please like and subscribe for more stories like this.